You know, I've been a wrestling fan for almost 25 years, if not almost 30 years. 25 to 30 years. I got into wrestling back in the mid-'80s when I was watching rock and wrestling cartoon on CBS. I would watch on occasions AWA on ESPN. And then I really started getting into it more so into the late 80s, early 90s, mostly thanks to my older sister. And I've been a fan since then. But like a lot of fans that have grown up in the 80s, in the 90s, and so on, I've come to understand that sometimes, what makes a wrestling promotion a good promotion is what makes them different and more unique than any other. When the WWE, when it was WWF, came into the spotlight in the 80s with the rock and wrestling connection, which said cartoon was inspired from, a lot of people, fans, wrestlers, backstage people, everybody wanted to jump on the WWF bandwagon. And why? Because WWF was doing something that made them more different and more unique than that of the NWA, WCW, and the AWA, and other promotions like UWF, the original, WCCW World Class, and several others. And again, people wanted to jump on board with that because it was different. It was unique. And it was something, and it would be something that would carry the WWF for many years throughout the 80s. From basically 84 all the way up into the mid-90s. Because in the mid-90s, something else happened. The WWF closed the doors on its Federation rock and wrestling era and decided to go in a direction they dubbed as the new generation. And for a while, this attracted fans to the product even more so because now you were focusing on younger wrestlers, so younger superstars that were never given the opportunity to shine, and now they were given that opportunity. An opportunity that WCW also had done for a while, but not really. Because many of WCW's stars at that time had headed up north to be part of this new generation movement. Now, some of the moves and jumps, they lasted for a while. Lex Luger, for example, lasted for a couple of years. He lasted from about essentially 92 to about the fall of 95, so about 3 years. The Steiner brothers, however, they didn't last too long. They lasted mainly from about late 92 to essentially early 94, to about mid-94, and that was it. About a 2-year run almost. Not even that. And then the following year, they went home. You know, a lot of names had jumped ship to WWF from places like WCW, from places like the AWA when it was closing its doors or just about to, from all the other promotions that tried to fill the void of the AWA, like the revamped UWF in Florida and many others. They tried to, they tried to fill that void. Even the USWA, when it started out, tried to fill that void, but they just couldn't. They just couldn't. And just like with the Federation year, the Rock and Wrestling Connection era in the WWF, a lot of people wanted to jump ship to the WWF because of this new generation slogan, because of the fact that they were pushing the newer stars, those that you never thought would have an opportunity to be pushed in the direction they were being pushed. And people loved that. They liked it. I mean, you even had some, now true, you had some other stars jump ship over to WCW, but that was due to other reasons, financial reasons. You have to remember at the time when a lot of these guys were jumping ship to WCW, they were jumping ship because of this. They wanted more money. And also they wanted more opportunities that they felt WCW could give them. So between WWF and WCW, even during the early to mid-90s, it kind of balanced out a little bit. Because you had some stars wanting to go to WCW for more money and more opportunities. You had stars like Jake the Snake. Reason? Money, and also obviously more opportunity. Big Boss Man, Ray Traylor, goes to WCW as the boss, and for what reason? More money, more opportunity. And the same could be said for those that jump ship to WWF. They jump ship because they wanted more opportunity. More money, but more opportunity. And again, it kind of strangely balanced itself out. Some succeeded, some didn't. Like I said, there were some that didn't last too long. Ric Flair, the Nature Boy, for example, he didn't last too long in WWF. There were vignettes. Vignettes that led to his debut on Primetime. You know, he was basically pushed right up our butts, if you will, right to the moon. And within the first few months of his debut, he wins the Royal Rumble and becomes WWF champion. He holds the belt for how long? Up to WrestleMania, loses it, regains it in the middle of the year, and then what happens? A few months later, he loses it, and then what happens? A few months later, he loses it again to Bret Hart. By losing it to Bret Hart in Saskatoon, Canada, Saskatoon, which was in Canada of all places, not only was it a moment no one thought would happen, a shocking moment no one thought would happen, but when Bret Hart became WWF champion, it signified the passing of the torch. It signified the ending of the Federation years, the Federation era, the Federation Rock and Wrestling era, and the beginning of the New Generation era. As soon as he became champion, it signified the New Generation had arrived. Because who was his first challenger? Who was Bret Hart's first challenger? Shawn Michaels. And gee, a year before that, Shawn Michaels was part of the Rockers, wasn't he? And they were in a tag team Survivor Series match, teaming with the Bushwhackers against the Nasty Boys and the Beverly Brothers. My, how much time has changed within a year's span, thus establishing that the new generation had arrived. That's right, the new generation had arrived. And I think Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels closed out the show. I think they did. But again, it shows you that the new generation was here. They had arrived on the scene. And Ric Flair, of course, he stayed with the company until the Royal Rumble, till around Royal Rumble 93, and then he was gone. He had they aired his Loser Leaves WWF match with him and Kurt Hennig, and he lost, of course, and he was gone. Following month, what happens? He shows up at Super Brawl back in WCW NWA. Why? Because it's a natural fit for him, and because things had changed down there, and there was more opportunity for him once again. An opportunity for him to once again become the face of that company. So in a strange way, like I said, it balanced things out. And then of course you got around the mid-90s, and then that's when things started to kind of not be so well for all of wrestling. The mid-90s really changed. The two major companies were starting to become more cartoonish again. They were trying to, in my opinion, trying to recapture that magic of the Federation Rock and Wrestling era. You take a look at WCW. They signed Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage. You know, they signed these guys. They signed Brutus Beefcake. They signed Earthquake, John Tenta. They signed all these WWF guys along with Hogan and Savage and a few others. And the main event storylines that these guys were involved in, along with Sting, heck, they even surprisingly got Lex Luger, who was one of the faces of the new generation in WWF, to jump back to WCW. And even with him, and even with a debut in Paul White, the Big Show, when he was the Giant, your main event storylines, if you will, your main event storylines from summer '94, essentially all the way up to about uncensored May '96. So it's almost 2 years worth of main event storylines were very cartoonish in many ways. Very cartoonish. Dungeon of Doom. Hello? You know, it was very cartoonish in many ways. Same with WWF. Yeah, it was a new generation. But from what a lot of people said, some of the gimmicks they came up with were very cartoonish. You know, they came up with gimmicks that when you would look at them, you'd be like, they had this guy? I mean, Mantar? You know, they had Mantar, they had Phantasmo, I guess his name was. Techno Team 2000. I mean, it's like, you know, they had so many different gimmicks at that time. Very cartoonish gimmicks. Some felt that if given the right opportunity, it could have been game changers, like Waylon Mercy, Dan Spivey's character, could have been a game changer. But it didn't happen. Wasn't given enough time. You took Mark Merrill, Johnny B. Bad character, and what did you do? You turned him into the Wild Man. A little cartoonish at times, but there you go. You took Too Cold Scorpio, turned him into Flash Funk. There you go. The point is, you were taking a new generation. Basically, what was going on between this time frame with these gimmicks in '95, mostly throughout '95, because that's what many people consider the worst year of wrestling. Both WCW and WWF were taking these things, and they were trying to recapture that magic that the Federation years, the Rock and Wrestling years, gave the WWF. They were trying to recapture that. And they were failing. They were failing. Which is why a lot of people were happy when an alternative came around in '94 and shook things up. This alternative was the key, was the catalyst for WCW doing what they did in '96. This was the catalyst for WWF doing what they did around '97, towards the middle and end of '97. This was the catalyst. And what was that catalyst? ECW. Because ECW was doing something that WCW and WWF were not doing. See, ECW was basically the rated R, NC-17, triple X wrestling that your parents would cover their kids' eyes from. They were that wrestling. They were that, as Paul Heyman put it in the ECW documentary WWF put out, they were the nirvana of wrestling. They just, bam, opened the door. And when they opened that door, and they just left it open, they just tore the door right off the hinges and left it open. It started to widespread. It started to spread its influence down on WCW and on WWF. And both companies realized that the reason people were tuning them out, the reason people didn't like what they were seeing and constantly booing things, is because they wanted change. And WCW, give them credit, were the first ones to do that when they brought in the NWO. No one saw the Hogan heel turn coming. But as soon as Hogan dropped the leg on Savage and joined forces with Hall and Nash, and you could talk about the whole thing in May with Hall showing up and then Nash showing up, here's the thing. WCW was taking a page from ECW and saying, you know what, they opened the door, let's go through it. And thus, when they did this whole thing leading into the Bash at the Beach, the Hogan leg drop, NWO being formed, basically they said, no more cartoonish crap for us anymore. We're focusing more on realism, we're focusing more on attitude, and being more edgy, and being more adult-oriented in some of our products. And that's why the NWO was formed. Because of that reason. To shake things up, and to send a message to ECW that they weren't the only, that they may have opened the door, they may have broke the hinges off the door and left it open, but WCW obliterated it. And just obliterated that entire opening, that entire side of that wall where that door was, and just let it all come in. WCW basically took the NWO and obliterated, and basically not just went through the door that ECW had opened, but they widened it, they obliterated it to the point they just let it all come in. To the point that they just let everything come in and change the face of wrestling as we knew it. In WWF, they tried. They tried to keep on pace, but they knew they had to change. They knew they had to change. That's why they associated themselves with ECW. That's why they cross-promoted with them. That's why they helped promote Barely Legal. That's why when Austin 316 happened in '96, and it just tunnel waved and tunnel waved and tunnel waved, and just waved and just got, and basically tunnel waved and tunnel waved into '97 and '98. That was all thanks to the Callis. And what's ironic about this is this all took place around the same time frame. This all took place around the same time frame as the NWO did. All took place around the same time that the whole ECW just being Nirvana and opening that door and breaking off the hinges and letting in this new influence, this new phoenix, if you will, just wash over the wrestling world, if you will. It was all around that time. WCW saw it. They went with the NWO thing starting in May. WWF saw it. They said, okay, let's have Austin say what he wants to say, and all that. It's all because of what ECW did. And then in '97, as the ball just kept getting bigger and bigger, in '96, give WWF credit. They tried. They tried to stick with obviously the formula they felt was successful for them, which was the very cartoonish formula. It didn't work. It didn't work. This formula, even after Austin said what he did. They even tried to blend in realism, edginess with cartooniness. Sort of have like an edgy, cartoony feel. It didn't work. What worked was what happened in '97 at Madison Square Garden. What worked was when they finally let The Rock be himself. What worked was when they did this damn screw job. And what worked was when Vince McMahon finally said, screw it. People hate my guts. I'm going to embrace it. That is what propelled wrestling into that attitude, edgy era. Into that extreme, edgy attitude era. That extreme, realistic attitude era, if you will. That ERA era. The ERA era. Extreme, realistic attitude era. Extreme for ECW, realistic for WCW, attitude for WWF. That's what did it. All these things within a span of a year, within the span of 1 year, a lot of this took and changed the game, and all because of one company. And that was ECW. That was ECW because of what they were being noticed for. People were talking about what they were doing. Changed the complexion of wrestling. WCW took that, merged it with what they were doing with the whole NWO. Then they took it to another stratosphere. And you see, when you look back at all that, You look back at all that and you say to yourself, why can't wrestling be like that again? Because of the times. The times, the time and the era. That's why wrestling can't be the way it was. That's why when people look at TNA, people ask the question, is TNA the new WCW? Because they see so many similarities. They see so many similarities. They see similarities with with TNA bringing in legends, just like WCW did. They see similarities with TNA doing certain things a certain way, like WCW did. You know, having factions like WCW did. But you see despite the fact that fans look at TNA as the WCW of this generation, of this time, they also look at TNA as hopefully once again being what ECW was, and being that nirvana that's going to break down the door once again. That's what they're hoping for. They even hope that for Ring of Honor. They look at Ring of Honor, and yeah, Ring of Honor doesn't do many pay-per-views. The only time Ring of Honor does any kind of pay-per-views anymore is just like a weekly deal. It's like a 3-part series, or 4-part, 6-part series, whatever you want to call it. And then they just do it on demand on their site. After the event's done, they filmed it, they put it on demand the next day without no problems. But the thing is, that's what fans are hoping for from either Ring of Honor or TNA. For them to be that promotion that becomes the nirvana of this generation and breaks and bashes that door open once again and just lets its influence fly over wrestling. That's what they're hoping for. That's what they're hoping for. I mean, you can even put CZW, Combat Zone Wrestling, in that category. But they're just hoping for one company to be the influencing factor that's going to basically get people's attention not only on their product, but on wrestling altogether. That's what they're hoping for. That is what they're hoping for. That is why when people look at Bound for Glory a week from this Bound for Glory this Sunday, they look at it as hopefully being that catalyst, being that thing that's going to help TNA launch itself back into prominence, back into the stratosphere. That's why they look at it. That's why they look at that. That's why when they see things like Ultimate X being booked, that's when they see things like Styles and Ray being booked, Sting and Magnus, they're hoping that the right decisions, booking decisions, will be done correctly, and that these booking decisions will help lift TNA to the stratosphere. That's what they're hoping for. They're hoping that this Sunday at Bound for Glory will be that passing of the guard, that passing of the torch, saying, here, new generation, you're the face of the companies, take it to that next level. That's what they're hoping for. That's why you have people hoping for Styles to beat Ray. That's why you have people hoping for Magnus to beat Sting. That's why you're having people hoping for the likes of Joe or Aries or Manic to win Ultimate X. Because they want TNA to go back to a level, to go to that level. They want TNA to be that catalyst that opens the floodgates again and allows wrestling to be what it was. That's what they're hoping for. They're hoping for it to be that moment. They're hoping for it to be the moment that wrestling changes for the better, and that its influence will be felt. That its influence will be felt all over. Again, and once again, fans hope for the same thing when Ring of Honor's around. They hope for the same thing with CZW. They hope for any of these promotions besides WWE to have that catalyst, to have that foundation built, to finally be that catalyst that opens the floodgates and says, screw, and basically says, screw these limitations. We want to be limitless. Screw this. We want to be free. We want to be able to do what we want. We want We want to give the fans what they asked for. We want to give the fans what they asked for. And that's what fans are hoping for this Sunday. Potentially, on paper, it looks good. You got potentially a good storyline with Styles, with AJ Styles being without a contract. Yes, it's very reminiscent of CM Punk's situation, but you have AJ Styles being without a contract, if you will, and the possibility that he could become world champion, come out on Impact and basically hold the company up and say, hey, you want me to stay? You got to do this. And that is exactly what TNA needs. That's what fans are hoping for. They're hoping for that moment to arrive. They're hoping for that moment to become a reality. And they hope that moment that once again becomes the moment that changes wrestling, just like it did back in the 80s with the Rock and Wrestling Federation, Rock and Wrestling deal, putting wrestling on the map. Just like when the NWL, ECW changed wrestling, just like when the ECW influence helped change wrestling and could help form the formation and help and basically influence WCW to go in that realistic route with the NWL. They hope it happens again, and they hope for this Sunday to be it. To be that moment. To not only put TNA back on the map, not only gets people watching TNA once again, but has its influence, its impact, if you will, to coin a phrase, felt throughout all wrestling. That's what they hope for this Sunday with TNA. This Sunday, they hope TNA can get out of the shadows of being known as the WCW of a new generation. They hope for that moment. They hope for it to happen this Sunday. And if you can get guys like if they do it correctly, like fans are hoping, well, they book people like Magnus to go over Sting, Rude to go over Angle. If you book guys like Styles to go over Ray, if you book guys like Manic, or Joe, or Aries, or Sabin to win Ultimate X, they are hoping for the moment. They are hoping it'll be a night that'll help change wrestling. They are hoping for that moment, folks. They are hoping for that to become a reality. But the thing is, can TNA pull it off? Again, they potentially have a good storyline, if you will. They have a potentially good storyline with AJ becoming champion and being champion without a contract. Think about it. Think about it. It's the opportunity you've been waiting for. And this is that moment. But will it happen? We're just going to have to wait and find out, folks. But again, I've been a wrestling fan for over 25 years. We're going on 25 to 30 years. And I've seen a lot of different eras come and go. Will we see the birth of a new era that's going to influence all wrestling, even the WWE? Or will TNA drop the ball? Will TNA become that Nirvana that ECW was? Or will they become the Beaver? Or will they become the Teletubs, if you will? We'll have to wait and find out. But that's just my thoughts on what wrestling is right now and what TNA, of all people, of all companies, has to do to help change it. Comment below. I'll talk to you all later. God bless. Take care.